I think it's safe to say that change is on my agenda. Change for good. And I embrace that and I enjoy that change. I don't fear it. That's the bit that excites me, is the idea of being able to bring some change.
Something unprecedented has quietly unfolded inside Buckingham Palace. King Charles III, the longest-waiting heir in British royal history, has transferred full operational control of the monarchy to Prince William. No ceremony, no cameras, no public statement, just signatures and a seismic, deliberately invisible shift of power. At the center of it all, Camilla. What could drive a king who sacrificed everything for the crown to hand it over before his time? What did Camilla allegedly do that was so damaging Charles activated an emergency document most palace insiders had never seen used? And what does this mean for William, Camilla, and the monarchy's future? The answers will change everything you thought you knew. The quiet transfer. Just moments ago, history seemed to pause. The velvet curtains of Clarence House fluttered faintly as King Charles stepped into the blinding glare of camera flashes. His expression was heavy, his voice quivering as he faced the nation and the world. Then came the words no one expected, the kind that freeze time and ripple through generations. Her Majesty, the Queen Consort Camilla, is to forfeit her royal title, effective immediately, pending a full investigation. A gasp spread through the gathered press like wind through dry leaves. The room seemed to tremble with the weight of those words. Never in modern history had a reigning monarch publicly severed such a bond. Not with such finality, not with such pain. Beside him, the Queen Mary's crown rested on its pedestal, an ornate relic glinting with the icy fire of Cullinan diamonds and rare gems. Once a proud emblem of unity, it now stood as a silent witness to division. Its brilliance contrasted painfully with the tension that filled the hall. Aides froze mid-breath. One murmured under his breath, "It's done." Outside, reporters jostled and shouted questions, their voices lost beneath the solemn toll of church bells echoing across London's grey skies. Inside, a royal household was unraveling. The question that burned through the air was simple, yet searing. What could drive a king to such a decision? According to whispers from Buckingham Palace insiders, the trigger was not gossip or hearsay, but something tangible, undeniable, a sapphire brooch. Not just any brooch, but one that once belonged to the late Princess Diana. It appeared out of nowhere at a Geneva auction, causing shockwaves through royal circles. How it got there was the mystery, until investigators traced its path back to Raymill House, Camilla's private residence in Wiltshire. Within hours, a secret intermediary was identified, a figure now reportedly under intense scrutiny by palace investigators. It was Princess Anne who first raised the alarm, her instincts as sharp as ever. Prince William, fierce in loyalty and protective of his mother's memory, demanded answers, and Catherine, calm, dignified, yet resolute, urged her father-in-law to act swiftly. That means that if King Charles ever faces health challenges or anything, the crown would still function smoothly without abdication. The structure ensures that the monarch remains the symbolic and constitutional heart of the nation, even if others assist in carrying the load. It's a quiet but powerful safeguard, one that has existed for decades and has been used before, including during Queen Elizabeth's later years. So when people hear talk of abdication and wonder what might happen now the king is unwell, the truth is that the monarchy already has a clear plan that doesn't require him to step down. His role as sovereign remains intact, while trusted family members ensure the work continues. This system is one of the most stable parts of Britain's unwritten constitution, and it has kept the monarchy running without chaos for generations. Still, no matter how strong this structure is, the rumors keep coming back, and many of them are tied to one thing: the king's age. At 76, Charles himself has joked that the bits don't work so well after you get past 70. While that remark was meant to sound light-hearted, it gave the media another reason to speculate about his future. Some took it as a hint that he might slow down or consider retirement in the coming years. However, those who know him personally say the opposite is true. Royal experts point out that King Charles's energy and dedication have remained steady. Despite his age, he continues to attend engagements across the country, hold meetings, and represent Britain on the global stage. For him, these moments are not burdens but privileges. His daily routine is packed with duties that would exhaust much younger people, yet he sees them as opportunities to serve. Even his health comments were more about being realistic than retreating. They showed that he is human, aware of his age, but still ready to give his best. Of course, not everyone agrees completely. A few royal commentators, like author Phil Dampier, have suggested that while abdication seems unlikely, it could only be considered in a very extreme case. Perhaps if the king's health were to decline significantly. But even he admits that this would be a last resort, not something pre-planned or expected. In other words, it would only happen if absolutely necessary. That kind of thinking shows just how different the British monarchy is from its European counterparts. In countries like the Netherlands or Denmark, abdication is now a normal and even celebrated part of modern royal tradition. But in Britain, the crown is viewed through a moral and sacred lens. Abdication is seen not as a choice, but as a disruption to the divine and constitutional order. That's why the story of Edward VIII still echoes so strongly. Every king and queen since that time has understood that stepping down isn't just about personal health or convenience. It's about breaking a sacred bond between the monarch, God, and the people. King Charles is deeply aware of that bond. Throughout his decades as heir, he watched his mother uphold her promise with unshakable dedication. Even during the hardest days of her reign, she never once hinted at stepping away. That example shaped him profoundly. It taught him that service isn't measured by comfort or convenience. It is measured by endurance. And in every speech and gesture since his accession, Charles has shown that he intends to carry that same belief. But here's the most intriguing part of all this, so stay tuned. A king's promise and duty beyond the rumor. When King Charles spoke at his coronation in May 2023, it was clear that this was not a man preparing to hand over his crown anytime soon. Every word, every vow, and every gesture reflected a deep understanding of the promise he was making. Not just to his family, but to the nation and the Commonwealth that looked to him as their sovereign. The coronation was more than a ceremony filled with jewels and tradition. It was a declaration of commitment, one that publicly tied him to a lifelong duty. During the service, Charles swore an oath before God and his people, promising to govern the people of the United Kingdom and his other realms, according to their laws and customs. He also vowed to preserve the Protestant Reformed religion and the settlement of the Church of England. These were not empty words. They were sacred commitments. In that moment, he accepted the same lifelong responsibility that had guided his late mother for 70 years. This vow was not something that could be adjusted, shortened, or set aside after a decade. It was a promise that would last as long as his life. People often forget that the British monarchy is not built on personal choice, but on sacred duty. Once a monarch takes that coronation oath, stepping down would mean going against the very foundation of that promise. That is why those who truly understand the depth of the coronation's meaning knew that the prediction about Charles abdicating simply did not fit the man or the moment. From his earliest speeches as Prince of Wales to his words on the day of his coronation, King Charles has always seen leadership as service. King Charles once stated that true freedom is found in serving others, not in seeking personal comfort, and that belief has guided every stage of his life. Before the crown was placed on his head, he offered a private prayer asking for God's grace to help him find, in thy service, perfect freedom. It was one of the most moving parts of the ceremony because it showed what kind of king he intended to be, one who leads not for himself, but for the good of the people. It echoed the strength of Queen Elizabeth, who had built her reign on the same principle: service, not self-service. To the royal family, duty is not a job that ends at retirement age. It is a lifelong calling. Those who were waiting for King Charles to hint at any form of abdication were met with silence, not because he avoided the question, but because his actions spoke for him. He continued to take on public duties, host state visits, and attend major international events despite the growing chatter about a so-called 10-year plan. And then, at the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, he made a statement that seemed to put the rumor to rest. He said, "I can assure you today that for however many years God grants me, I will join you and the people of the Commonwealth on every step of this journey." That single line carried weight. It was not an ordinary sentence, it was a message that directly confronted the talk of abdication. By saying, "For however many years God grants me," the king made it clear that his reign would last for life, just as his mother's had. His promise was not bound by a timeline or a plan. It was guided by faith and by duty, the two things that have always defined the British crown. When people close to the royal household were asked about these rumors, they too dismissed them. Grant Harold, who had once served as King Charles's butler, was one of the first to speak up. He stated that abdication simply wasn't in the king's nature. According to him, Charles's sense of duty runs too deep. Harold explained that the king's outlook mirrors his mother's, which is a promise to serve until his final breath. This statement may sound symbolic, but within the royal world, it carries a serious truth. The king's work continues no matter his age, and stepping down is never viewed as an option unless a severe crisis forces it. But the monarchy has already prepared for such possibilities in a much smarter way, and it's one that makes abdication unnecessary even in times of illness or aging. The British Constitution includes a structure called the Councillors of State. This system allows certain senior royals to act on the monarch's behalf when he cannot perform his duties temporarily. At the moment, those councillors include Queen Camilla, Prince William, Princess Anne, and Prince Edward. They can handle formal matters, sign documents, or represent the crown in official functions when needed. This system was designed to ensure the monarchy remains stable without forcing a king or queen to give up the throne. "Protect the crown," she is said to have told him quietly, "no matter the cost." When the moment came, King Charles's hands trembled as he signed the decree. The pen seemed almost too heavy to hold, its ink carrying the weight of centuries of tradition, duty, and heartbreak. His voice, though restrained, carried the echo of ancient resolve. The crown must remain pure. And with that, the unthinkable became real. The British monarchy now stands at a fragile crossroads, dazzling yet fractured, venerable yet shadowed by scandal. What had once been an institution built on loyalty and legacy now finds itself entangled in questions of morality and law. How does a family bound by heritage confront the possibility of betrayal within its own walls? Outside the palace gates, the world watches, fascinated, stunned, perhaps even sympathetic. Inside, corridors that once rang with the measured footsteps of tradition are now filled with uneasy silence. Staff whisper. Advisors convene behind closed doors. The air itself feels heavy with secrets yet to be revealed. Could this be the moment that redefines the royal lineage itself? Could a single jewel, lost, stolen, or sold, unravel the delicate thread of royal continuity? Or is it merely the surface of something deeper? A story of trust, broken, of love, tested, of history repeating itself in haunting symmetry. To understand this moment, this fracture in the crown, one must look backward. Behind this announcement lies more than scandal. It is a tale of inheritance, of rivalry, of grief and guilt buried beneath the grandeur of monarchy. It is the story of how a sapphire brooch, once a token of affection, became the spark that ignited the most shocking royal reckoning of our time. And so, as the church bells continue to toll and the palace gates remain closed, one truth becomes clear. This is not just a royal scandal. It is the beginning of a new chapter in a centuries-old saga, where loyalty, love, and legacy collide under the shadow of the crown. Was Camilla challenged over the discovery before the king's announcement? What was Camilla's reaction and response when she was confronted? Did she deny it? Let's find out. King Charles and William's silent verdict. A few days earlier, on November 8th, the atmosphere inside London's Royal Albert Hall felt almost sacred. Soft beams of red and gold lit the room for the Festival of Remembrance. Casting gentle shadows over the royal family, Camilla stood beside King Charles, her hand resting lightly on his arm, as if she were both partner and protector. She smiled at the hymns, bowed at the prayers, and held herself with that familiar air of quiet confidence. To the cameras, it was a portrait of unity, steady, graceful, calm. But those who were close enough to watch the king's face noticed something far more telling. Charles's expression didn't match the warmth of the moment. It wasn't anger, and it wasn't affection. It was a kind of distance, like someone pulling back from a truth they could no longer ignore. And tonight, that distance didn't stay hidden. It became royal action. Behind palace walls, father and son, King Charles and Prince William, had finally spoken with one voice. Publicly, the decision was described as administrative, a simple adjustment to royal duties. But the insiders who whispered behind closed doors all used the same word: final. Outside Buckingham Palace, rain drifted through the November fog, soaking the reporters who had gathered for what they sensed would be a turning point. Inside, the Queen's private rooms remained lit long after the rest of the palace had gone dark. She hadn't released a statement. Perhaps she didn't need to. Sometimes the most powerful response is the one wrapped in silence, a silence that exposes everything no one dares say aloud. The truth is, the decision had been made long before it was ever written down. That same evening, Charles held a private meeting with William. According to a palace aide, the conversation lasted barely 20 minutes. It ended with the king's quiet but steady declaration: "This must come from both of us, not as father and son, but as crown and heir." Within hours, the foundations of the joint announcement were drafted. It wouldn't remove titles. It wouldn't accuse Camilla of wrongdoing. Such dramatic action could destabilize a monarchy already weakened by health concerns, public scrutiny, and constant whispers of scandal. Instead, the statement took a different shape, one of polished language, soft on the surface, sharp in its meaning. It spoke of integrity, transparency, and renewed dedication to service. Do you think I wanted this? This life? This burden? I rebuilt it. For this family. For this crown. And now I am being destroyed for something I may never have even ordered. Anne met her eyes coldly. "No one's destroying you," she said. "But trust, once lost, rarely returns." Catherine spoke next, her voice soft but cutting. "These jewels are not just ornaments," she said. "They carry stories, memories. When one disappears, a story is erased. And once a story is lost, the crown itself grows dimmer." The clock struck midnight. A decision was made. The Privy Council would convene at dawn. Camilla would be asked, politely but firmly, to relinquish her title. Her reign as queen consort was over before the morning sun would rise. Charles remained in the maple room long after the others had gone. He stared at the glass case that held the crown, centuries of power and pain sealed within it. His whisper filled the emptiness. The crown endures. Hours later, Camilla's carriage rolled through the dark countryside toward Raymill House. The night outside was silent, save for the rhythmic sound of wheels on gravel. When she arrived, she walked into her quiet room and found a photograph from her coronation. She and Charles, smiling, her crown tilted just slightly. She looked at it for a long moment, then turned it face down. In another part of the city, Anne's voice came through the phone. "You did the right thing," she told her brother. Charles paused before answering, his tone low and tired. "It won't heal." Anne's reply came softly, like a truth too old to argue with. "It wasn't meant to heal," she said. "It was meant to protect." And in that silence, heavy, royal, and unending, the crown, once again, stood untouched. How did Prince William get to know about the theft? What was the evidence that implicated Camilla? Let's delve into the details of the discovery that resulted in the king's tragic announcement, the confrontation and collapse. On the cold evening of October 11th, the royal palace released a carefully worded statement. Her Majesty the Queen Consort will assist with an internal inquiry regarding the provenance of certain royal heirlooms. It sounded calm and polite, but beneath those few measured words, a storm was brewing within the walls of power. At Clarence House, the usual calm of ceremony gave way to confrontation. The Maple Room, known for its polished mahogany table and gilded portraits, had once hosted rehearsals for the king's coronation speech. But that night, it was no stage for celebration. It was a courtroom. King Charles sat at the head of the table, his face set in weary resolve. To his right sat Princess Anne, her expression sharp as glass. To his left, Prince William and Catherine, the Princess of Wales, both solemn and tense. And at the far end sat Camilla, her face pale, her trademark pearls replaced by a simple gold chain, the kind of change that spoke louder than words. The silence was suffocating until Camilla finally broke it, her voice trembling but steady. "You all think I stole something," she said. Her eyes darted toward Charles. "Do you think I stole her?" The meaning was unmistakable. Her referred to Diana, the ghost that still lingered in every royal corridor. Charles's reply came slowly, his voice cracked with strain. "It's not about her," he said. "It's about the crown and what people believe." Anne slid a thick folder across the table. On the front was stamped "Confidential." Inside were papers, photographs, signatures, the kind of evidence that could not easily be dismissed. "These," Anne said flatly, "speak for themselves." Camilla's lips trembled. "These were not my orders," she said, her voice catching. William leaned forward, his tone calm but edged with steel. "Then say whose they were. Because silence, stepmother or not, will cause more damage than any scandal." For a moment, only the slow ticking of the wall clock filled the room. Charles leaned back, eyes heavy. "Whoever signed it," he said at last, "no longer matters. Ambiguity is poison to the crown." His words fell like a verdict. Behind him, through the glass case, the imperial state crown shimmered faintly under the chandelier, half in light, half in shadow, as if judging them all. Camilla's mask began to crack. Her voice rose, breaking through the formality that had once defined her life. But behind those gentle words was something far harsher, punishment disguised as procedure, mercy shaped to look like control. When the final version reached Camilla, she read it twice. She didn't sign it. She didn't have to. Everything she needed to understand was already buried between the lines. That night, she returned to Clarence House. Staff members reported that she dismissed her driver earlier than usual and spent the night alone in her drawing room. On a small table beside her sat an unsealed envelope addressed only with 3 words, "To my king." She didn't write more. She didn't need to. By dawn, the corridors of the monarchy felt changed, like something important had cracked, quietly and permanently. The joint statement went public, barely 100 words long, yet heavy enough to shake every newsroom in Britain. It simply announced that Queen Camilla would step back from her individual public duties, and that the king and his heir stood firmly united in their commitment to transparency and the preservation of royal heritage. The public heard diplomacy. The palace heard exile. That night, Clarence House shut down its private wing. Secretaries were reassigned, press officers replaced, and an unsettling quiet settled over the halls. Camilla refused every phone call, every offer of sympathy. Only one aide saw her standing at the window, watching the rain blur the city lights and whispering, "They've rewritten my purpose." Meanwhile, at Windsor Castle, Charles sat with William and Princess Anne for a private dinner. No cameras, no speeches, just the quiet truth between three people who carried the weight of a kingdom. Charles looked tired, older than usual. "It's done," he finally said. "She was never the enemy, only the storm." Anne, ever blunt, responded, "The crown doesn't survive storms through kindness. It survives through silence." William said little, but he understood exactly what this decision would cost and why it had to be made. And this breaking point leads to one question that has haunted the palace for years. How did the whole thing truly begin? And what hidden moment set this storm in motion? Stay tuned. Camilla and the monarchy's hidden power. To understand how the monarchy reached this fragile moment, we need to look back, far from the cameras, far from the headlines, and deep inside the quiet rooms where real power navigating a modern reign and personal challenges. When King Charles III ascended the throne, the world watched closely. It wasn't just because he had waited longer than any heir in British history, but because his reign came at a time when the monarchy itself was being questioned. People wondered what kind of king he would be and whether he could balance tradition with the changing expectations of a modern world. For Charles, the crown wasn't just an inheritance, it was a responsibility that required careful reimagining. And that's exactly what he began doing from the very first days of his reign. One of the most noticeable things about King Charles has always been his vision for a modern monarchy. Long before he became king, even back in the 1990s, he often spoke about his belief that the royal family should be smaller and more efficient. He wanted it to represent value, not excess. That's where the idea of a slimmed-down monarchy began. He believed that with fewer working royals and more focus on the direct line of succession, the public would feel their money was being used more wisely, and the institution would remain relevant to the times. But when he finally took the throne, that very idea started taking shape under unusual circumstances. The departures of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, combined with the scandals surrounding Prince Andrew, had already reduced the active members of the family. So what Charles once planned as a careful and deliberate reform suddenly became a reality out of necessity. It wasn't a smooth transition, but a forced adaptation. Some experts began calling it a skeleton monarchy, because the core group that carried out royal duties had become so small. Still, Charles didn't panic. He saw this moment as a test of resilience and an opportunity to reshape the monarchy's image. His focus turned to efficiency and transparency. He made it clear that every royal engagement, every public event, should have meaning and purpose. And when he appointed Prince William and Princess Catherine as the Prince and Princess of Wales shortly after his accession, it was a symbolic move to show the monarchy's future was already being prepared. It wasn't about removing tradition, it was about adapting it. This slimmed-down structure did come with challenges, though. With fewer senior royals available, the workload became heavier for the remaining members like Queen Camilla, Princess Anne, and Prince William. Every appearance mattered more because the spotlight was narrower. Yet despite these pressures, Charles managed to maintain a sense of stability. He continued to represent continuity even while quietly reshaping how the monarchy operates behind the scenes. And this wasn't new for him. King Charles had been preparing for a lifetime to lead with purpose. Decades before the crown rested on his head, he was already deeply involved in causes that mattered to ordinary people. That's what makes his story unique among monarchs. His reign isn't built on sudden changes, but on a lifelong foundation of advocacy and commitment. Long before he was king, he created what became one of the UK's most impactful charities, the Prince's Trust, now known as the King's Trust. It started humbly in 1976, using his severance pay from the Navy, only about £7,400 at the time. His goal was simple but powerful. It was to help young people who were struggling to find jobs, homes, or purpose. He wanted to give them hope and opportunities that society often denied them. Over the years, that idea grew into something far greater than anyone could have imagined. Today, the King's Trust has helped more than 1 million young people across the UK. It provides training, mentorship, and funding for those who want to start small businesses or gain new skills. Many success stories have come from this initiative, from young entrepreneurs to artists who once thought they had no future. Charles's belief was always that potential exists in everyone, and it only needs guidance and opportunity to shine. But his vision didn't stop at Britain's borders. Over time, the King's Trust expanded globally, creating branches in over 20 countries. It became a symbol of how compassion and leadership can create lasting change. And when it was renamed in 2024 to the King's Trust, it wasn't just a rebranding, it was the continuation of a mission he had started nearly 50 years earlier. That same dedication to purpose can also be seen in his lifelong passion for the environment. Long before terms like climate change and sustainability became part of everyday conversation, Charles was already warning about the dangers of pollution, deforestation, and overconsumption. People once mocked him for talking to plants and promoting organic farming, but history has proven how far ahead of his time he truly was. Now, as king, he's been called the Sustainability King, and that title fits perfectly. His reign continues to highlight the importance of protecting nature and building a green future. Under his guidance, royal estates like Highgrove and Sandringham have become examples of sustainable agriculture and conservation. And through countless speeches and projects, he has encouraged businesses and governments to think about long-term impact rather than short-term profit. But even with all these achievements, Charles's reign hasn't been without challenges. His health has recently been a major topic of public concern, especially following his cancer diagnosis. Yet, despite that, the king has shown remarkable strength and commitment. He continues to carry out engagements when he can, and when he cannot, he relies on the support of trusted family members like Queen Camilla and Prince William. Behind all this is the Councillors of State, which allows designated royals to perform duties on behalf of the monarch if he is temporarily unwell or traveling abroad. This system ensures continuity without needing abdication or any drastic changes. It's a reminder that the monarchy, while traditional, has structures designed to adapt to any situation. Through all these adjustments, Charles has shown one consistent trait, and that's perseverance. His life has always been about patience and long preparation, and now his reign reflects that same calm strength. He doesn't seek popularity or dramatic reforms, but rather balance and sustainability, both in his causes and in the institution he leads. Publicly, he often speaks about service, but privately, those who know him say his sense of duty runs even deeper. He views his position not as a privilege, but as a calling. And while some may speculate about abdication or early retirement, his actions show the opposite. He's building for the future, for his son William, for his grandchildren, and for the institution that has shaped British identity for over 1,000 years. What makes his reign particularly interesting is how personal it feels. Unlike past monarchs who maintained a strict distance, Charles often shows his human side. He's candid about aging, he jokes about his own flaws, and he speaks with genuine warmth about the people he meets. That authenticity has helped him connect with a generation that doesn't automatically respect authority, but responds to sincerity. It's also what makes his story so different from his mother's. Queen Elizabeth II reigned through duty and tradition, and while Charles honors that legacy, he does it in his own way, which is through conversation, compassion, and inclusion. He understands that the monarchy's survival in the modern world depends on relevance, and he's working to make sure it's not just a symbol of the past, but also a voice in shaping the future. However, modernization comes with risk. Every reform challenges centuries of custom, and not everyone welcomes change. Some traditionalists worry that by slimming down the monarchy, Charles might weaken its ceremonial presence. Others argue that he's doing exactly what's needed, which is focusing on purpose rather than pageantry. And this debate is likely to continue as his reign progresses, especially as younger royals begin to take on more visible roles. But as King Charles continues to reshape the monarchy, one question quietly lingers. How does his vision align with that of the man who will one day inherit it?